Misogynistic man laughs at woman so, then her secret leaves him speechless. The boardroom was filled with the low hum of murmured conversations, the kind of nervous energy that always accompanied high-stakes meetings. At the head of the sleek, polished table stood Catherine Shaw, CEO of Shaw Enterprises. Her tailored navy blazer and calm demeanor exuded authority, but she was all too aware of the undercurrent of skepticism in the room. Catherine glanced at the clock on the wall. 5 minutes to go. She flipped through her notes, double-checking every detail for the upcoming presentation. Her company was on the verge of closing a groundbreaking partnership with a global tech firm, and this meeting would seal the deal. Years of hard work, persistence, and battles against dismissive competitors had brought her to this moment. And then came his voice. "Ah, Catherine, there you are. Thought you might have chickened out," said Thomas Grant, striding into the room with a swagger that seemed to suck the air out of the space. His loud laugh echoed off the walls, drawing the attention of everyone present. Catherine didn't look up immediately. She knew better than to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, she calmly closed her folder and met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Good morning, Thomas," she said coolly. "Good morning," he repeated, his grin widening. "You're about to present in front of the biggest players in the industry, and all you've got is a polite greeting? Come on, Catherine, show some fire." The men around the table chuckled nervously, clearly taking their cues from Thomas. He was one of the industry's most prominent and most arrogant figures, known for his cutthroat tactics and blatant disregard for anyone he deemed unworthy of his respect. Catherine, unfortunately, had been a frequent target of his derision. But she wasn't here to spar with him. Not yet anyway. "Fire's overrated," she said, her tone measured. "I prefer results." Her response elicited a few raised eyebrows, and even Thomas seemed momentarily caught off guard. But the pause was brief. He threw his head back and laughed, loud and mocking. "Results," she says. "Gentlemen, I hope you're taking notes," Thomas said, gesturing to the room. "This is how you fake confidence when you know you're out of your depth." Catherine's jaw tightened ever so slightly, but her expression remained composed. She had spent years enduring men like Thomas, men who underestimated her, who believed that her success was a fluke rather than the product of relentless effort. She wasn't about to let him rattle her. The meeting began, and Catherine launched into her presentation. She spoke with precision and clarity, outlining Shaw Enterprises' innovative strategies and the mutual benefits of the proposed partnership. Her team had spent months preparing for this moment, and it showed. Every question was met with a thoughtful, well-supported answer. But Thomas wasn't interested in the substance of her presentation. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirking as though he were watching an amateur stumble through their first pitch. "Interesting ideas, Catherine," he said, interrupting her mid-sentence. "But don't you think you're aiming a bit too high? I mean, these are ambitious plans for a company like yours. Not everyone can handle the big leagues." The jab was met with a few awkward chuckles from the audience, but Catherine remained unfazed. She met Thomas's gaze, her voice steady as she replied. "Ambition isn't a liability, Thomas. It's what drives innovation. And if you'd prefer to play it safe, that's your choice. But I'm here to talk about possibilities, not limitations." The room fell silent. For a moment, it seemed as though Catherine's words had landed, cutting through Thomas's bluster. But then he laughed again, louder this time, as though her confidence was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. "Possibilities. That's rich," he said, shaking his head. "All right, Catherine. Let's see if your possibilities hold up under pressure." As the meeting continued, Thomas made it his mission to undermine her at every turn. He interrupted her responses, peppered her with unnecessary questions, and even made snide remarks about her unique perspective as a female CEO. The tension in the room was palpable, but Catherine refused to let it break her focus. What Thomas didn't know, what no one in the room knew, was that Catherine had come prepared for this. She had anticipated his every move, his every insult. And she had a card up her sleeve that would bring his arrogance crashing down. "All right, enough beating around the bush," Thomas said, leaning forward with a predatory grin. "I think we can all agree that while Catherine's ideas are charming, they're not exactly realistic. Why don't we cut to the chase and talk about something a little more grounded? Catherine tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing just enough to hint at what was coming. She let him ramble for a few more seconds before calmly setting her folder down and standing. "That's an excellent suggestion, Thomas," she said. "Let's cut to the chase." The room went still as Catherine reached into her bag and pulled out a single document. She placed it on the table, sliding it toward Thomas with deliberate precision. "What's this?" he asked, his smirk faltering slightly. "Take a look," she said, her tone cool but firm. "It's a detailed analysis of your company's recent activities. Specifically, the questionable financial practices you've been using to inflate your profits." Thomas's smirk vanished. He grabbed the document, his eyes scanning the pages with growing panic. The room was silent, the air heavy with tension. "How did you—" he began, but Catherine cut him off. "It wasn't difficult," she said. "When you spend more time mocking others than protecting your own house, things tend to fall through the cracks." Thomas looked up, his face pale. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, I think I do," Catherine replied. "And so will the board once I share this information with them. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to have a more private conversation about how to rectify the situation." The room erupted into whispers as the balance of power shifted. For the first time, Thomas was speechless. The silence in the room was deafening. Thomas sat frozen, his eyes darting between the document in his hands and Catherine, who stood tall and composed at the head of the table. The smug confidence he had carried just moments ago had evaporated, replaced by a growing sense of panic. "Rectify the situation?" Thomas finally said, his voice strained. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious," Catherine said, her tone razor-sharp. "And unless you'd like this information to become public knowledge, I suggest you start taking me and this partnership seriously." The room erupted into a low murmur. The executives seated around the table exchanged glances, their unease growing by the second. Everyone had seen Thomas Grant dominate a room before, but this was new. He was floundering, grasping for control, and failing miserably. Thomas slammed the document onto the table, his face flushed. "This is slander. You have no proof of any wrongdoing." Catherine raised an eyebrow, her expression unbothered. "The proof is right in front of you, Thomas. Every transaction, every shell company, it's all there. And let me remind you, this isn't slander. This is corporate accountability." She folded her arms, letting her words settle in the room. "Now, if you'd like to dispute these findings, I'd be more than happy to involve legal counsel. But something tells me you'd prefer to keep this discussion confined to the boardroom." Thomas's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He glanced at the other executives, searching for support, but none of them came to his aid. Their expressions ranged from shock to quiet satisfaction. For years, Thomas had wielded his power with impunity, trampling over anyone who dared to stand in his way. But now, the tables had turned. The power shift. The room remained tense as Catherine slowly sat back down, her posture poised and confident. "Let's get back to the matter at hand," she said, flipping open her folder. "We were discussing the terms of the partnership, were we not?" Thomas stared at her, his jaw clenched. He looked as though he wanted to argue, to push back, but he knew he was cornered. Any attempt to fight her now would only dig his grave deeper. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "Let's continue." Catherine smiled, but it wasn't the smile of someone gloating over a victory. It was the smile of someone who knew their worth and refused to let others define it. She proceeded to outline the final points of her proposal, her voice calm and steady. Every word carried weight, and the room hung on her every syllable. Thomas remained silent for the rest of the meeting, his once overbearing presence reduced to a shadow. By the time the discussion concluded, it was clear to everyone in the room who held the real power. The aftermath. As the executives filed out of the boardroom, many of them paused to shake Catherine's hand, their respect for her evident in their expressions. Even those who had initially sided with Thomas couldn't deny her brilliance and composure. Thomas, however, lingered behind, his movements hesitant. When the room was nearly empty, he approached Catherine, his arrogance replaced by something that almost resembled humility. "Catherine," he began, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. "About what happened in there?" She raised a hand, cutting him off. "Don't bother apologizing, Thomas. I'm not interested in words. If you want to make amends, show me through your actions. Treat your competitors with respect. Treat women in this industry with respect. Prove that you can be better." Thomas nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I'll keep that in mind." Catherine didn't wait for him to say more. She gathered her things and walked out of the boardroom, her heels clicking against the polished floor. For the first time in a long time, she felt the weight of victory, not just for herself, but for every woman who had ever been underestimated, belittled, or dismissed. A legacy of change. The weeks that followed were transformative. News of the boardroom confrontation spread quietly but quickly, cementing Catherine's reputation as a force to be reckoned with. The partnership deal she had worked so hard to secure went through without a hitch, and Shaw Enterprises thrived under her leadership. As for Thomas, the experience left a lasting mark. Though he was too proud to admit it outright, he began to change. His comments became less dismissive, his tone less condescending. He even reached out to Catherine months later, asking for her advice on navigating a particularly challenging business deal. Catherine, ever the professional, offered her insights without hesitation. She didn't trust him fully yet, but she saw the potential for growth. And that was enough. Conversation with a protege. One afternoon, as Catherine prepared for another meeting, a young woman on her team approached her. "Miss Shaw," she said hesitantly. "Do you have a moment?" "Of course," Catherine replied, setting her papers aside. "What's on your mind?" The young woman shifted nervously. "I just wanted to say, watching you handle Thomas Grant in that meeting was one of the most inspiring things I've ever seen. I've always looked up to you, but that day, you showed me what real leadership looks like." Catherine smiled, her expression softening. "Thank you. That means a lot." The young woman hesitated, then added, "How do you do it? Stay so calm, especially when people like him try to tear you down?" Catherine thought for a moment before replying. "It's not always easy," she admitted. "But I've learned that staying calm is the most powerful thing you can do. People like Thomas thrive on chaos. They want to see you lose control. But when you stay composed, you show them that their words have no power over you." The young woman nodded, her admiration evident. "I hope I can be half as strong as you one day." "You will be," Catherine said confidently. "And when the time comes, you'll show them exactly what you're capable of." Final reflections. As Catherine walked into her next meeting, she couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. Her journey had been long and challenging, filled with obstacles that had tested her resolve. But she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. And as she sat at the head of the table, ready to lead once more, she knew one thing for certain. No matter how many Thomas Grants she encountered, she would never let anyone dim her light. Months turned into years, and Catherine's influence continued to spread beyond Shaw Enterprises. The story of her confrontation with Thomas became a quiet legend in the industry, shared in whispers at conferences and networking events. For many women working in male-dominated fields, it was a beacon of hope, a reminder that composure and strategy could topple even the most arrogant opponents. But Catherine wasn't interested in being a legend. She was interested in creating change. Under her leadership, Shaw Enterprises launched initiatives to support women in business, from mentorship programs to scholarships for aspiring female entrepreneurs. Catherine personally mentored dozens of young women, teaching them not just how to navigate the challenges of the corporate world, but how to thrive in it. One of those women was Megan, the young team member who had approached Catherine after the Thomas Grant meeting. Over time, Megan blossomed under Catherine's guidance, rising through the ranks with confidence and skill. She often credited Catherine with shaping her career. "I used to think I had to change who I was to succeed," Megan told Catherine one day. "But you showed me that strength comes from being authentic. From standing tall, even when it feels impossible." Catherine smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "You've always had that strength, Megan. I just helped you see it." Thomas's transformation. Though Thomas had been deeply shaken by his encounter with Catherine, it wasn't an instant fix for his behavior. Change, after all, is rarely immediate. But as time went on, he began to reflect on his actions, not just in that meeting but throughout his career. For years, he had operated under the belief that ruthlessness was the key to success. He had seen kindness as weakness and had used his power to belittle others rather than uplift them. But Catherine had shattered that belief. She had proven that strength didn't come from tearing others down, it came from lifting others up. Thomas began to approach his work differently. He listened more, spoke less, and sought out the opinions of those he had once dismissed. It wasn't easy, there were setbacks and moments of doubt, but he was determined to be better. One day, Thomas attended a charity gala where Catherine was the keynote speaker. As she took the stage, her presence commanding the room, he felt a pang of something he hadn't felt in years: genuine respect. After the event, he approached her, his usual bravado replaced by quiet humility. "Catherine," he said, extending a hand. "It's good to see you again." Catherine took his hand, her expression unreadable. "Thomas, it's been a while. I wanted to thank you," he said, his voice steady but sincere. "You didn't just put me in my place that day, you made me rethink everything. I've been trying to do better." "Oh, I hope it shows." Catherine studied him for a moment before nodding. "It does. And I hope you keep at it. The industry needs more men who are willing to change." Thomas smiled, a genuine warmth in his expression. "Thank you. That means a lot." As he walked away, Catherine couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. People could change, it just took the right moment to spark it. A celebration of progress. 5 years later, Shaw Enterprises celebrated a milestone, their 50th anniversary. The event was a grand affair, with industry leaders, employees, and partners coming together to honor the company's legacy. Catherine stood at the center of it all, her presence as commanding as ever. She had built something extraordinary, not just a successful company, but a culture of respect, innovation, and equality. And tonight, she was surrounded by the people who had helped make it possible. As the evening wore on, Megan took the stage to deliver a toast. Now a senior executive at Shaw Enterprises, she spoke with confidence and poise, her voice ringing clear across the room. "I wouldn't be standing here tonight if it weren't for Catherine Shaw," Megan began. "She taught me, and so many others, that strength isn't about how loud you are or how much power you wield. It's about integrity. It's about lifting others up and creating space for everyone to succeed." The room erupted into applause, and Catherine felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't done any of this for recognition, but hearing Megan's words was a reminder of why she had fought so hard. After the toast, Megan joined Catherine at her table, her face glowing with pride. "Did I do okay?" she asked. "You did more than okay," Catherine replied, her voice soft but full of emotion. "You were incredible." Reflections. As the night wound down, Catherine found herself sitting alone on the terrace, gazing out at the city lights. She thought back to the countless battles she had fought, the obstacles she had overcome, and the people she had met along the way. It had been a long journey, but one she wouldn't trade for anything. Thomas's words from the gala echoed in her mind. "You didn't just put me in my place, you made me rethink everything." She hadn't set out to change him, but the fact that she had proved that even the smallest actions could have a ripple effect. Megan joined her on the terrace, a glass of champagne in hand. "Big night," she said, sitting down beside Catherine. "It is," Catherine agreed, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "And it's not just about the company, it's about everyone who made it what it is." Megan smiled. "You've created something incredible, Catherine. And it's going to last long after all of us are gone." Catherine turned to her, her gaze steady. "It's not about me, Megan. It's about all of us. And it's about making sure that the next generation has it a little easier than we did." They sat in comfortable silence, the weight of the moment settling over them. For Catherine, this wasn't the end. It was just another chapter in a story that was still being written. As Catherine reflected on her career and the values she had instilled at Shaw Enterprises, she realized how much the culture she had nurtured extended beyond the company. Employees who had once worked under her leadership carried those same principles of respect and inclusivity into their new roles across industries. It wasn't just about the policies or programs she implemented, it was about the mindset she inspired in people. Her mentorship with Megan was only the beginning. Over the next few years, Catherine expanded her personal mission. She began traveling, speaking at universities and conferences about her experiences and the lessons she had learned. Her speeches were more than motivational, they were transformative. She didn't just talk about success, she talked about integrity, about standing firm in the face of adversity, and about creating opportunities for others. Catherine's name began to appear in articles and books about leadership. But she wasn't interested in the fame. For her, the true measure of her success was the change she saw in others. Thomas's full circle moment. While Catherine's influence grew, Thomas continued to work on improving himself. He had started initiatives in his own company to create more equitable opportunities for women and underrepresented groups, drawing directly from what he had learned from Catherine. At first, there was skepticism. His reputation as a misogynistic, arrogant businessman hadn't been forgotten, and many questioned his sincerity. But Thomas didn't waver. He knew that trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight. It had to be earned through consistent action. One day, years after their fateful boardroom encounter, Thomas invited Catherine to speak at an event hosted by his company. The invitation came with a personal note. "Catherine, you changed the trajectory of my life, and I want others to learn from you as I have. It would mean a great deal to have you share your wisdom with my team. Sincerely, us." Catherine read the note twice, a small smile playing on her lips. She could sense the humility in his words, a stark contrast to the man she had once faced. She agreed to attend, curious to see how far Thomas had come. The event. When Catherine arrived at the event, she was greeted by Thomas, who looked genuinely pleased to see her. The event was larger than she had anticipated, with hundreds of employees gathered in a sprawling conference hall. Thomas introduced her as the keynote speaker, and for the first time in their long history, his voice carried no trace of condescension, only admiration. Catherine took the stage, addressing the audience with her usual poise. She spoke about resilience, respect, and the power of leadership to shape not just companies but entire industries. As she spoke, she noticed Thomas sitting in the front row, listening intently. His expression wasn't just one of respect, it was one of gratitude. When her speech ended, the room erupted into applause. Thomas stood and approached the stage, shaking her hand as she stepped down. "Thank you, Catherine," he said, his voice steady. "For everything." Catherine nodded. "Keep doing the work, Thomas. It's never too late to make a difference." The next generation. Years later, Catherine retired from Shaw Enterprises, leaving the company in the capable hands of Megan and the next generation of leaders. But retirement didn't mean stepping away from her mission. Catherine continued to mentor, teach, and inspire, dedicating her time to causes she believed in. One afternoon, as she sat in her study, she received a letter from a young woman she had never met. The letter was handwritten, the words heartfelt. "Dear Miss Shaw, I don't know if you remember me, but I was in the audience during one of your speeches. At the time, I was struggling to find my place in a company where I felt overlooked and underestimated. Your words gave me the courage to speak up, to take risks, and to believe in myself. I recently got promoted, and I know it wouldn't have happened without your inspiration. Thank you for showing me, and so many others, that strength comes from within. Sincerely, Emily." Catherine held the letter close, her heart swelling with pride. She had received many letters like this over the years, but each one reminded her why she had fought so hard, why she had never backed down. The final reflection. In her later years, Catherine often thought back to that pivotal meeting with Thomas Grant. It had been a defining moment in her career, not because of the power she had wielded but because of the change it had sparked, in Thomas, in herself, and in the countless people who had heard the story. She had proven that dignity and resilience could overcome arrogance and prejudice. She had shown that leadership wasn't about domination, it was about empowerment. And as she sat on her porch one quiet evening, watching the sun set over the horizon, Catherine felt a deep sense of peace. Her journey had been long and challenging, but it had been worth every step. She had left a legacy not just in business but in the hearts of those she had touched. She smiled, thinking to herself, the real power isn't in what you achieve, it's in how you lift others along the way. Even after stepping away from Shaw Enterprises, Catherine's name continued to inspire. Her mentorship network expanded into a global initiative called Empower, connecting women in leadership roles with aspiring professionals from diverse industries. What started as a personal mission grew into a movement, touching lives far beyond what Catherine had ever imagined. At Empower's 5-year anniversary gala, Megan, now a respected leader in her own right, took the stage to deliver a heartfelt speech about the program's impact. Catherine Shaw taught us all what it means to lead with integrity, Megan began, her voice steady and full of emotion. She didn't just break barriers, she built bridges for others to cross. And while her accomplishments in business are extraordinary, her greatest legacy is the countless lives she's transformed. As the audience applauded, Catherine sat quietly in the front row, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She hadn't sought out recognition for her work, but seeing the ripple effect of her efforts filled her with an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. Thomas Grant's letter. Months after the gala, Catherine received an unexpected package in the mail. It was from Thomas Grant. She opened the envelope to find a handwritten letter, accompanied by a copy of his new book titled Lessons Learned, A Journey of Redemption in Leadership. The letter read, "Dear Catherine, I owe you more than I can ever repay. Your strength, your resilience, and your refusal to back down showed me the kind of leader I should have been all along. Writing this book was my way of owning my mistakes and sharing what I've learned with others. I hope it can serve as a small step toward making amends for the damage I caused. Thank you for being the catalyst for my change. Your influence reaches farther than you know. With respect and gratitude, Thomas Grant." Catherine held the letter for a long moment, reflecting on the man Thomas had become. She hadn't set out to change him, but his transformation was proof that even the most hardened hearts could be softened with the right push. She placed the book on her shelf, not as a trophy but as a reminder of the power of resilience and compassion. The next chapter. As Catherine entered the later years of her life, she began penning her memoirs. The process was both cathartic and enlightening, giving her the chance to reflect on her journey, the challenges she had faced, the victories she had earned, and the lessons she had learned. The memoir, titled Stand Tall, The Story of Resilience and Leadership, became an instant bestseller, resonating with readers across the globe. Through her words, Catherine continued to inspire, proving that her legacy wasn't confined to boardrooms or businesses, it was woven into the fabric of countless lives. A final meeting. One sunny afternoon, years after their boardroom showdown, Catherine and Thomas met for coffee at a quiet cafe. Both were older now, their faces lined with the passage of time, but their mutual respect had only grown stronger. "I read your book," Catherine said, sipping her tea. "It's honest, vulnerable. I'm proud of you for writing it." Thomas smiled, a trace of humility in his expression. "It wouldn't have existed without you. You gave me the wake-up call I needed." They spoke for hours, sharing stories of their journeys and the lessons they had taken from their experiences. By the time they parted ways, it was clear to both of them how much they had influenced each other's lives. "You know," Thomas said as they stood outside the cafe, "I used to think power was about being the loudest voice in the room. But you taught me that real power comes from lifting others up." Catherine smiled, her eyes warm. "I'm glad you finally see it, Thomas. It's a lesson worth remembering. A legacy that endures." As Catherine's life came full circle, her influence only grew. Her memoir, her initiatives, and her leadership philosophy became a guiding light for generations to come. The story of her confrontation with Thomas Grant became a timeless example of how resilience and integrity could overcome arrogance and prejudice. And even after she was gone, her legacy lived on. In the leaders she mentored, the lives she touched, and the countless people who found the courage to stand tall because of her example. Catherine Shaw had proven that leadership wasn't just about power or success. It was about lifting others, inspiring change, and leaving the world better than you found it. Years after Catherine's passing, her legacy continued to thrive. Shaw Enterprises remained a beacon of ethical leadership and innovation, led by Megan and a new generation of leaders who carried Catherine's values into the future. The Empower initiative had grown into a global network, connecting millions of women with mentors, resources, and opportunities to rise in their fields. A statue of Catherine was unveiled in front of Shaw Enterprises headquarters on the 10th anniversary of her passing. It depicted her standing tall, her head held high, a folder in one hand and the other extended outward, symbolizing her commitment to lifting others. Below the statue was an inscription that read, "Stand tall, not just for yourself, but for those who come after you. Catherine Shaw." The unveiling ceremony brought together people from all walks of life, employees, men's, friends, and even competitors like Thomas Grant, who had since become a staunch advocate for equality in leadership. As the crowd stood in silence, Meghan stepped forward to give a speech. Catherine Shaw wasn't just a leader, she was a movement, Meghan began, her voice steady despite the emotion welling up inside her. She taught us to believe in our worth, to stand firm in our convictions, and to never let prejudice dictate our paths. Her impact is immeasurable, and her legacy will continue to inspire us for generations to come. Thomas's continued redemption. Thomas Grant's transformation became one of the most talked about stories in the business world. Following Catherine's passing, he made it his mission to honor her memory by using his platform to champion the causes she cared about. He established scholarships for women in business schools, donated to mentorship programs, and wrote columns on ethical leadership. In one of his speeches at a leadership summit, Thomas openly shared the story of his confrontation with Catherine. "Catherine Shaw was the most formidable person I've ever met," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "She didn't just hold me accountable, she made me face the parts of myself I had been ignoring. She showed me that leadership isn't about power or ego, it's about service, about creating space for others to thrive. If there's one thing I hope to accomplish, it's to carry forward her vision." The audience erupted into applause, many of them inspired not just by Catherine's legacy but by Thomas's willingness to change the next generation. One day, years after Catherine's passing, Meghan received an email from a young woman named Ellie. The subject line read, "Catherine Shaw changed my life." Ellie's message told the story of how she had stumbled across one of Catherine's speeches online during a particularly difficult time in her life. She had been struggling to find her place in a company where she felt invisible and undervalued. But Catherine's words had struck a chord, inspiring her to stand up for herself and pursue her dreams. Because of her, Ellie wrote, "I had the courage to apply for a leadership position I never thought I could get. And now, I'm leading a team of my own, mentoring others just like she did. I only wish I could have thanked her in person." Meghan replied to the email, inviting Ellie to visit the Callahan Leadership Center, an organization Shaw Enterprises had founded in Catherine's honor to provide leadership training and mentorship for underrepresented groups. When Ellie arrived, she was struck by the warmth and sense of community that filled the space. As she walked through the halls, she stopped in front of a wall filled with photos and quotes from Catherine. At the center was one of Catherine's most famous lines. "True leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, it's about lifting others so they can find their own." Ellie smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Catherine Shaw's legacy wasn't just about what she had accomplished, it was about the doors she had opened for others. A legacy carried forward. The story of Catherine Shaw became a case study in business schools, a chapter in leadership books, and an enduring example of how one person's courage could reshape an entire industry. Her lessons transcended time, influencing leaders across generations and industries. Years later, a young woman stood at the base of Catherine's statue, reading the inscription. She was a fresh graduate, about to start her first job in a male-dominated field. As she stared at the words, she felt a surge of confidence. If Catherine Shaw could stand tall in the face of adversity, so could she. And with that, Catherine's legacy continued to grow, not as a static monument, but as a living, breathing force that inspired strength, resilience, and the unshakable belief that anyone could make a difference. As the years passed, Catherine Shaw's legacy transcended borders, industries, and cultures. The Empower Initiative, which started as a mentorship program, grew into a global movement with chapters in over 50 countries. It became a network where women and underrepresented leaders shared resources, stories, and opportunities. Conferences under the Empower banner drew thousands, becoming a platform for voices that had long been overlooked. Her book, Stand Tall: The Story of Resilience and Leadership, was translated into dozens of languages, becoming a touchstone for those navigating adversity. From corporate boardrooms in New York to classrooms in rural villages, Catherine's words resonated deeply. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to keep moving forward despite it. The initiatives inspired by Catherine didn't just focus on leadership. They expanded into education, equity in pay, and programs to ensure equal opportunities for all, regardless of gender or background. Each project carried her guiding principle: leadership is about creating a path for others to walk alongside you, not behind you. Ellie's rise. Ellie, the young woman inspired by Catherine's work, quickly became a star at the Callahan Leadership Center. With Megan as her mentor, Ellie blossomed into a leader who embodied Catherine's principles. Her natural charisma, combined with her genuine desire to help others, made her a beacon for the next generation of aspiring leaders. One day, Megan called Ellie into her office. "We've been watching you," she said, her tone warm but serious. "Your work here has been extraordinary, and we think you're ready for the next step." Ellie blinked, her heart racing. "The next step?" Megan smiled. "We'd like you to take over as the director of the Callahan Leadership Center." Ellie's eyes widened. "Me? Are you sure?" "More than sure," Megan said. "You've proven that you have what it takes. And I think Catherine would have seen the same potential in you that I do." Ellie felt tears welling up but held them back. "Thank you," she said softly. "I won't let you down." Megan placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know you won't. And remember, this isn't about perfection. It's about lifting others, just like Catherine did." A global summit in Catherine's honor. On the 15th anniversary of Catherine's passing, a global summit was held in her honor. The event, named the Shaw Leadership Summit, brought together leaders from around the world to celebrate her life and discuss the future of ethical leadership. Ellie, now the director of the Callahan Leadership Center, opened the event with a powerful speech. "Catherine Shaw was more than a leader," she began, her voice steady and clear. "She was a force of nature. She taught us that leadership isn't about power, it's about purpose. It's about standing tall, even when the odds are against you, and lifting others to stand alongside you." The audience, which included CEOs, policymakers, activists, and students, erupted into applause. Ellie continued, her confidence growing with every word. "She showed us that one voice can spark a movement, that one act of courage can change lives. And as we gather here today, let us honor her by carrying her mission forward, not just in our words, but in our actions." The summit featured panels, workshops, and speeches from some of the most influential leaders in the world, many of whom credited Catherine's work for inspiring their own journeys. By the end of the event, it was clear that her legacy wasn't just enduring, it was evolving. As the years rolled on, Catherine's story continued to inspire. Young leaders like Ellie carried the torch, ensuring that her values remained at the forefront of discussions about leadership, equality, and resilience. Her principles became woven into the fabric of industries, education systems, and communities worldwide. At Shaw Enterprises, Megan spearheaded a new initiative called the Shaw Fellowship, which provided funding and mentorship to underrepresented entrepreneurs. The fellowship's motto was simple but powerful: build the future you want to see. One of the first fellowship recipients, a young woman named Amara, launched a startup focused on bringing sustainable energy solutions to underserved communities. In her acceptance speech, she quoted Catherine directly: "True leadership isn't about being the loudest, it's about making the biggest impact." The final reflection. Decades after Catherine's passing, her name remained synonymous with courage, integrity, and empowerment. The statue outside Shaw Enterprises became a symbol not just for the company but for the countless lives she had touched. People traveled from around the world to see it, to stand in its shadow and draw strength from her words. One day, a young girl visiting the statue with her parents looked up at it, her eyes wide with wonder. "Who was she?" the girl asked. Her mother knelt beside her, pointing to the inscription. "She was a leader," she said. "Someone who believed that everyone has the power to make a difference, no matter how small they feel." The girl nodded thoughtfully. "I want to be like her." Her mother smiled. "You can be." And so, Catherine Shaw's legacy lived on, not just in the leaders she had mentored or the organizations she had inspired, but in the hearts of every person who dared to stand tall, to speak up, and to believe that they, too, could change the world. 50 years after Catherine Shaw's passing, her influence had become immortal. Her story was woven into the fabric of modern leadership philosophies, taught in schools, and referenced in business strategies worldwide. The anniversary of her passing was marked by an extraordinary event, the unveiling of the Shaw Center for Global Leadership and Equity. Located in a sprawling campus in Geneva, Switzerland, the center was designed to be a hub for fostering ethical leadership and innovative solutions to global challenges. The opening ceremony drew world leaders, philanthropists, and changemakers from every corner of the globe. Among the attendees were Megan, now retired, and Ellie, who had ascended to global prominence as one of the most influential leadership advocates of her time. Ellie, now in her 50s, stood on the stage before a massive crowd, her voice filled with reverence as she addressed the audience. Catherine Shaw's legacy transcends time, space, and industries, Ellie began. Her journey wasn't just about breaking glass ceilings, it was about lifting others as she climbed. She believed in a future where equity, respect, and courage weren't exceptions but norms. And this center stands as a testament to her unwavering belief in the potential of humanity. Behind her, a massive portrait of Catherine was revealed, showing her with her signature calm determination and warm smile. Beneath the image were her iconic words: "Stand tall, not just for yourself, but for those who come after you." The audience erupted into applause, many standing in awe of the legacy that Catherine had built, one decision and one life at a time. A personal connection. As Ellie walked through the newly unveiled center later that evening, she stopped to admire the gallery dedicated to Catherine's life. It featured photographs, letters, and personal artifacts that told the story of her extraordinary journey. A young woman approached Ellie, her voice tentative but filled with curiosity. "Excuse me," the woman said, "I just wanted to thank you. Your work, and Catherine's story, has changed my life." Ellie turned to her, smiling. "Thank you. What's your name?" "Isabella," the woman said. "I'm here on a scholarship from the Shaw Fellowship. I'm working on a project to bring leadership training to rural communities in South America." Ellie's heart swelled with pride. "That's incredible, Isabella. Catherine would be so proud to know how her work continues to inspire leaders like you." Isabella hesitated for a moment, then added, "I've always wondered, what do you think made Catherine so unshakable? How did she stay so strong in the face of everything she went through?" Ellie looked at the portrait of Catherine on the wall, her expression thoughtful. Catherine's strength didn't come from never being afraid or uncertain. It came from her belief in something bigger than herself. She wasn't just fighting for her own success, she was fighting to make the world better for everyone. And when you have that kind of purpose, fear loses its power. Isabella nodded, her determination renewed. "Thank you. I hope I can carry even a fraction of her strength." "You already are," Ellie said, placing a hand on Isabella's shoulder. "Keep going. The world needs leaders like you." The Shaw Leadership Prize. A few years later, the Shaw Center for Global Leadership and Equity established an annual prize in Catherine's name. The Catherine Shaw Leadership Prize became one of the most prestigious honors in the world, awarded to individuals who demonstrated extraordinary courage, integrity, and commitment to creating positive change. The first recipient was a young activist from Kenya named Amara Nyong'o, who had founded a network of educational programs for girls in underserved communities. In her acceptance speech, Amara quoted Catherine directly. "True leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, it's about making the biggest impact." Catherine Shaw taught us that, and today, I stand here because of the path she paved for women like me, living legacy. Generations later, Catherine's story remained as relevant as ever. Children learned about her in classrooms, aspiring leaders studied her strategies, and her quotes adorned office walls and personal journals. She was more than a historical figure, she was a guiding light for those who dared to dream of a better world. At the Shaw Center, a new tradition emerged. Every year on her birthday, visitors from around the world would gather at her statue to share stories of how Catherine had inspired them. The event became known as Shaw Day, a celebration of courage, resilience, and the enduring power of leadership. Among the attendees were people of all ages and backgrounds, CEOs, activists, students, and everyday individuals whose lives had been touched by Catherine's work. Each carried a piece of her legacy, ensuring that her impact would never fade. An eternal flame. In the end, Catherine Shaw's legacy wasn't confined to a single industry, generation, or movement. It was a flame passed from person to person, illuminating the path forward for those who believed in the power of integrity, courage, and equity. As her portrait hung in the halls of the Shaw Center, her words continued to inspire. Stand tall, not just for yourself, but for those who come after you. And so, the flame burned on, bright, unyielding, and eternal.